Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Shots into Near NFL podcast from FTN Fantasy for Thursday, July 17th, 2025. We're talking about the NFC North and whether the Packers can win the division or the Lions going to take it home again, plus the Vikings and Bears. And we have our special guest is Aaron Nagler from Cheesehead TV. So we're going to start off with the Packers, and a reminder to everyone, of course, first of all, if you watch us live on YouTube, you can make comments and ask questions. And of course, the FTN Football Almanac 2025 is available now. So you want to download that at ftnfantasy.com/almanac. Yes, congratulations to Jim Steck-Schulte, who was the winner of our free copy of the Almanac from last week's show, because he correctly guessed that the Buffalo Bills do have the highest win projection in this year's book, helped by the fact that they have an easier schedule than the Ravens, partly because the Ravens have to play the NFC North. A really good division.
So you see how you bring it all around. I like
where
it.
all four teams have a projection of average or better, and the schedule strength is Chicago 3rd, Minnesota 4th, Detroit 6th, and Green Bay 7th. So tough schedules. They play the NFC East and the AFC North, plus they play each other. So we do have the Lions as the favorite in the division. We have the Packers second. So we brought Aaron on to talk to us a little bit about the Packers, who it's sort of interesting because for these previews, I wrote down these big lists of who was in and out for each team.
Right.
And there's not a lot of in and out for the Packers.
That's right.
Center is out, and the couple of cornerbacks are couple of new rookie wide receivers, but it's not a lot of change from last year.
Yeah, that's a pinpoint, and I think that's how the Packers like it. You know, it's funny because I know there are a lot of Packers fans that get kind of frustrated by exactly what you're talking about in regards to there's not a lot of movement in the offseason, not a lot of headlines being made. While, I mean, you look at the Vikings, all the money they laid out, the Bears were very active, and I think sometimes fans get a little envious of all that activity and all the coverage of that activity. But man, the Packers have been draft and develop with emphasis on develop for a very long time, going back to, Ted Thompson, hell, even back to Ron Wolf, and that's what makes this such a difficult exercise. I think for us on the outside looking in, we do see minimal activity and we think, well, they haven't done a whole lot, but they know what they have indoors, right? Behind closed doors at practices, meeting rooms, what have you. And they are projecting certain guys to develop and grow and become better players and more important players in their program. So while the activity on the outside is very minimal, they've always been a team that leans into this idea that we know what we have. We're really secure in the knowledge of what we have, and we have expectations that certain guys in certain position groups, we're going to develop from within. And we're not worried about the fact that, yeah, these other teams are outlaying all this cash and spending all this money and using all this cap space for guys that are coming in from other programs. And it doesn't mean they completely eschew it, of course, but more often than not, they're going to trust in their development program. And that's, certainly been the case this offseason.
Plus, they didn't lose a lot of guys. Also, last week we talked about the Eagles and how they're depending on a lot of draft and develop to replace guys that they lost. The Packers didn't lose, right? They lost half a season of Jair Alexander if he's healthy, Eric Stokes, who was bad last year, and Josh Myers. That's the main things that they lost. So it's not like they're replacing a lot of guys on.
Right. And the big component there is the fact that just where they are as a program. This is something my co-founder, Corey Banke, talks about quite a bit, as far as when fans get frustrated when they see other teams operating certain ways. Well, yeah, their program is in a very different spot. You look at the Packers, and Mike touched on this on his write-up of the Packers in the Almanac. When you look at where they were coming from in regards to the separation from Aaron Rodgers and the real ripping of the Band-Aid as far as jettisoning so much veteran talent when that occurred, they've been the youngest team in the league the last 2 years. And they have somewhat maybe a bit overachieved as far as making the playoffs both of those seasons. Mike alluded to it at the end of his write-up as far as, look, this is a team that has kind of navigated these waters as far as, making sure that they're still competitive while being pretty, dramatic in their rebuild as far as going from this veteran-laden Rodgers-led team to the youngest team in the league with a quarterback who's a first-time starter. And I, as a fan, much prefer this approach to, say, what the Saints are going through, where they kick the can forever,
Wow.
desperately trying to get back to the Super Bowl with Drew Brees. And now you see the hell they're in. Man, I am very thankful to be a Packers fan in that regard.
That's the thing with this team, because you talk about that history of draft and develop, and look where it gets them. It gets them where Rodgers leaves, and they're a playoff team 2 years in a row, and they're in the conversation. And then the flip side of it, look where it gets them. Third place,
right.
Not really being able to beat the top teams in the division.
Mike, I think you laid it out perfectly as far as, you look at the victories and you look at the win totals and you're like, okay, that's a pretty successful year.
Right.
But there's no doubt. I love the framing that you had as far as, okay, if I presented you with this team, you would think, oh, they're a wide receiver away. They're a corner away. They're a pass rusher away. And then you get into the offseason, and yes, they did sign a corner, but for the most part, they didn't really take aggressive swings in any of those areas. And it's like, well,
first round pick. That's an aggressive swing. They took a first round pick on a wide receiver.
Even for the Packers, though, that's a developmental pick, Like, I do expect he'll play right away, Matthew Golden, but I certainly don't think he's going to be out there, the majority of the time, especially early in the season. But yeah, I think it is interesting to see that approach and the limitations it might kind of put on you.
Yeah, one of the things that made me curious with Matthew Golden, it's like, well, here's our wide receiver one. I'm like, really?
I don't think they look at it like that.
Right. I don't think he should be. It's almost like, well, he's almost sliding in where Christian Watson would be if he was healthy, right, as kind of a vertical threat. And so you've got that committee. I think you're hoping for a lot of development from that very talented, but sometimes frustrating.
Very frustrating. I mean, the drops, dependent on, I don't know where it was on FTN, but I know they led the league or were at the top when it comes to drops. And more importantly, on third and fourth down, they dropped a lot of passes. And that's what's so frustrating is, like, you saw the talent 2 years ago, and it was so inconsistent last year. And all those drops on third and fourth down kill drives, take away opportunities to put more points on the board, and ultimately lose you football games. And that's what I think the real story of the 2024 Packers was, and what I'm so fascinated to see how they kind of, fix that in 2025, as far as this is a team that completely and utterly shot themselves in the foot repeatedly, whether it was drops, pre-snap penalties, fumbles. There's so many instances, especially in those games, right? The game against Detroit where Watson fumbles, the game against the Vikings where Josh Jacobs fumbles on the opening drive. Mm-hmm. These are the things where you can't do that against the best teams in the league and expect to win. So to me, that's, if they can eliminate the self-inflicted wounds, they should be cooking with gas.
It's an interesting thing because we often think of those kinds of self-inflicted wounds as coaching.
Right.
But a lot of times teams with good coaches still have those self-inflicted wounds.
Right.
And this is a team with good coaching.
Agreed.
And they still have those self-inflicted wounds.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I say when we're on watch party. In the thick of the moment, the heat of the moment, it's hard to kind of rationalize it away because you're so mad that it's happened. But it is like the coaches aren't sitting there going, yeah, hold it loosey-goosey. Like, don't worry about 3 points of pressure. Like, it's fine. Like, they're preaching this stuff. They're drilling this stuff. There's only so much you can do as a coach until it does become incumbent upon the player to make sure that it happens on the field.
What's been going on? I mean, there was talk, a suggestion of friction among the receivers to a degree. There was some friction with Elgton Jenkins moving to center. There was obviously Alexander was friction incarnate.
True.
Overall, in terms of the vibe of this, is this stuff settled? Is this a nothing burger? What's going on there?
Most of it is a nothing burger, especially the wide receiver stuff. I know Josh Jacobs said what he said at the Super Bowl, which I was thankful for because they gave us a lot of fodder and a lot of content over that week, where normally that would be a bit of a desert. But, Dontavian Wicks went a little public with a tweet, and certainly, whatever was occurring there, has certainly been handled in-house, and that's mostly a nothing burger. The Elgton Jenkins thing remains interesting and does remain a question mark because, when they signed Aaron Banks on the first day of free agency and the first opportunity, the beat had to ask Brian Gutekunst, well, okay, is the plan like to move Elgton? And yep. Oh yeah, he's moving to center. No problem. Well, that's all well and good in theory, but then you get to the offseason workouts, you get to OTAs and minicamp, and Elgton is not in attendance and then does show up for the mandatory minicamp. I'm here just so I won't get fined, and doesn't participate because he wants an adjustment to his contract. And that is still hanging out there right now as we sit here on July 17th with veterans set to report on the 22nd. This week window here is going to be fascinating to see what happens, because I think without an adjustment to that contract, I don't think we're going to see Elton report, and then it's going to get real interesting.
And it's center. It's center.
That's
By the
center.
way, I didn't know Dontavian Wicks could tweet without dropping his phone. I didn't know that was a possibility.
See, this is what I love about you, Mike. You get that snark and you throw it out there, and it's just like red meat. It's so good. It's so well done.
Grouch just wants to know, can we expect a next step in the defensive scheme of second-year defensive coordinator Hafley? Jeff Hafley, I believe?
Yes, sir. Yes, absolutely. In fact, I did an entire video about this at the Cheesehead TV YouTube channel, which I encourage everyone to check out. I talked with Cody Alexander from Match Quarters. Cody is a former defensive backs coach in college, and he is very knowledgeable on the defensive side of the ball. And he and I talked about, what Hafley was able to do last year with a real kind of, I don't say limited, but man, he was ginning stuff up left and right because he had no pass rush, right? He did a great job with disguise, did a wonderful job as far as using his personnel that was on hand. Yes, I think the continued kind of ability to really hide stuff and get to different kind of coverages that maybe you're not expecting pre-snap. I mean, he was one of the best in the league last year, right out of the gate in that regard. I think we'll continue to see that as far as really trying to confuse quarterbacks and really trying to take advantage of them in that regard. But I will also say, I know Matt LaFleur and Jeff really want to get to a point where they don't have to count on a lot of that. I think they leaned into it last year because they had to. They would much prefer to just rush 4 and play, coverage roulette on the back end. But as long as that pass rush remains a deficiency, and man, I tell you, that's a huge question mark going into the season.
They really need Lucas Van Ness to wake up.
I mean, to do something, right? Now, look, the revelation during the OTAs when he was available to the media was that he played the back half of the year with a broken thumb. Okay, I'll give you some grace. But it ain't like you were lighting the world on fire with a healthy thumb. So I don't know, man. Like, yes, he absolutely. I mean, for a 13th overall pick, they need way more out of him. There's zero doubt about that.
And on the back end, I see Hobbs as a St. Brown eraser. But I don't know if they
You would hope, right? I mean, because that's been an issue for them. That has been a big issue for them, no doubt about it. I mean, he's done his best work in the slot, and certainly Amon-Ra St. Brown is a slot merchant, so that would hopefully be the matchup there. But I do think it's not going to be as simple, and I know you know this, as like follow him wherever he goes. Like there will be certain situational stuff, like probably red zone type area stuff, and maybe like third downs where they'll probably try to get that matchup. But for the most part, they're going to continue to play a whole lot of zone, a lot of match, like as far as not really playing traditional man coverage. That wasn't a big kind of component of their defense last year, and I don't expect that to change much.
And I'll point out from a statistical point of view, they were third in turnovers per drive last year. And so the coaching staff is going to have to sort of coach past that regression to keep their defense in the same place.
And it's funny because we talked about that at the beginning of the year because McKinney was basically picking a ball off every week, right, for 8 weeks, whatever it was. And they got a couple fumble recoveries. And I do remember Packers fans, because, we're never happy. You're grousing about, they're being, it's all being held together by turnovers. But I'll tell you what, you look at the back half of last year, especially, I wouldn't say like the last 5 games or so, probably 4 games, Hafley coached his butt off, and they played good defense. And I'm not saying it was championship level. I'm not saying that, but it was very good defense with a pretty makeshift crew on the back end. I mean, they had Stokes as their dime back. Obviously Jair was not available. They were losing safeties seemingly every week, and man, he held it together, and they played good ball. So I know there's a lot of hand wringing about the corner spot. I think they really like their top 3 guys, and I'm fascinated to get to camp and watch the depth that they've assembled there, because some of those guys are going to have to step up and will undoubtedly have to play at some point this year.
I always upset Packers fans because Keshan Nixon always comes out well in the charting stats.
He's a good player. Yeah. He's a good player. It drives me insane the hate
and
he gets.
Good. He's a good
player. Yes.
Right. It's the other corner, but if you consider Hobbs a slot, the other corner, well, that's the big question mark.
Valentine hopefully continues to progress, because I do think he has played better and better in his time in the league so far. Certainly he's going to have a target on his back this year. If you're out there as an offensive game planner, how can we get him on whoever we want, to try and take advantage of him. I do think, like I said, I think he's got the physicality necessary. I think he's a good cover guy. I think he's improving in that regard. But yeah, I think he's going to get tested early and often. There's zero doubt about that.
So just to finish up, let me ask you, let's say that what we expect to happen happens, which is that they don't win the division, but they win a wild card again. Is there going to be a feeling of, oh no, we're running in place? Or is there going to be a feeling of, look, we're still a young growing team, and once the Lions get out of the way, this is our division?
I suspect internally it'll be much more towards the latter, but I will say the kind of interesting wrinkle this year is the fact that the Packers do have a new president and CEO in Ed Policy, who's taking over for Mark Murphy. And he was interviewed as he is about to take over this job on July 25th when he hosts his first shareholders meeting. He was asked point blank, because both Matt and Brian have 2 years left on their deals, right? And he point blank said, well, I'm not going to give them extensions right now, but I also don't like any lame duck situations. So it's kind of a vote of confidence, but at the same time, you got to show me something. As far as like, we get to the end of this year, say your projection comes to pass, right? They don't win the division and they do get the playoffs. And let's say they do or don't win a game. Like, a lot of it depends on how you're playing, right? As far as how it feels around a team. But Ed's going to have a decision to make there where, okay, we're still headed in the right direction despite not moving forward in the playoffs. Or does he, and look, I get some heat for this whenever I say this, but I believe it 100%. There's every possibility he gets to the end of the year and goes, you know what? These aren't my guys. And he goes and wants to make his own move. Like, I think that's the chance of that is minimal, but there's no way you can tell me it's impossible. Right. So I think that's the major wrinkle here, that probably under normal circumstances, what you're talking about, no doubt, probably everybody's back. But I tell you what, it does have a feeling around, and this is what Brian Gutekunst alluded to at the end of the season last kind of January. It's time to start competing for championships again. Those are his words. And I got to think the whole point of this is, okay, it's time to go win the division again. It's been a while. Packers used to do it every year. It's been a couple years. It's time to, okay, we're done being the youngest team, 7th seed, etc. It's time to go win the division. And I think that's the expectation. And anything short of that, it's going to get real interesting around Green Bay.
All right, man. Thank you so much, Aaron Nagler. Cheesehead.tv is the URL, and the YouTube channel as well. And if you're a Packers fan or just want to know about the Packers, they are all on top of all of your Packers stuff. Hope you have a good rest of the offseason, and we'll talk to you sometime soon.
Talk to you guys soon. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
All right. All right, next we're going to talk about the Detroit Lions.
Yes.
Once I put us back to a two-person window here. Hold on.
All the color drained. He had all the green. And I think he has better lighting than we do. And I decided to go with the earth tone. And now this is the drabbest podcast on the internet.
Yeah, I'm wearing peach today. So, yeah. The Detroit Lions are still our number one team in this division. We have them winning about 50% of the time in the simulations. Despite the changes, and the big change, of course, is, there's personnel changes, Ragnow retiring and Kevin Zeitler, and the change at cornerback from Carlton Davis to DJ Reed.
Right.
But the big thing is the change in coordinators.
Yes.
The loss of Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, and the arrival of John Morton, and then Kelvin Shepard also got a promotion, that he's the new defensive coordinator. And I think, with no disrespect to Aaron Glenn, I think most people think it's the Ben Johnson. Yeah. Ben Johnson's the guy who's mostly been regarded as a genius because he's been able to take Jared Goff and turn this offense into one of the top offenses in the league.
Right. And one of the things when we do projections and it's about the coordinators, that's kind of where I turn back to you. My one takeaway was they did a pretty good mix. Like, there was a 3-way divorce on this coaching staff. And there was a chance that Glenn grabbed so many coordinators and then Johnson grabbed so many coordinators that Campbell was left scrambling. It's a pretty good balance where he brings in Morton, who is a Peyton guy.
Yes.
But he keeps Hank Fraley. He keeps Mark Brunell. I look at that and say there's enough infrastructure still in place here, including Mark Campbell, that that I'm not worried about the Lions on offense having a sudden regression.
And Morton, when he was with the Jets, the 1 year he was an offensive coordinator, 2017, they were 24th in DVOA, which is bad, but it's better than the Jets have usually been. And I do remember a lot of talk about oh, isn't John Morton doing some interesting things with motion? Isn't John Morton doing some interesting things with his personnel for the Jets? That offense is more interesting than you would think. And then after a year, Todd Bowles got, disregarded. And so Morton went with him, and that was the end of that.
Right. And since then, again, he's been sort of a Peyton guy. But when you think about the running game, that's usually the run game coordinator, offensive line coach, and that's Fraley, and he's still there. So, again, that's not a concern. Ragnow at center.
Yes, losing Ragnow is a big deal that I don't know if we've properly made up for in the projections. I will fully admit the thing that my projections have the hardest time dealing with is offensive line changes, because they're very hard to put in numerical terms.
Right. And right now I see Tate Rutledge, and that's a second-round pick. He's penciled in as the center. Christian Mahogany, one of my favorite names in all of football right now. He's penciled in at guard for the vacancy there. And it's like an entirely new cream center with the bread being the same as the tackles. So I don't know how to interpret that, and especially when we're interpreting that on this is a Super Bowl contender, not like, well, it's a rebuilding team. You just
the other thing I'll point out is we all talk about the Lions and the defensive injuries, and they led the league in defensive injuries. Yes. And we have their defense projected number one in part because of the regression in health. Mm-hmm. But the offense was one of the healthiest in the league.
Right.
So it's very likely that the defense will be healthier, but the offense will not. And so you wonder which guys can they lose and not really fall off that much. Like, I'll bet you that they could lose Jamison Williams and it wouldn't all fall to pieces, but can they lose Amon-Ra St. Brown for 5 games and not have it fall to pieces? I don't know.
Right. You can lose David Montgomery, or can't you? Is he an essential change-up? Is Williams important because of the fact that he gives you the 1 home run per game? I don't know, but you're right. They're very healthy on the offensive line. Defensive line, every time I read something about the Lions right now, it's about Marcus Davenport. About how well can he be the number 2 guy? Was he showing something for a game and a half? And it'd be great if they just had like Von Miller over there, wouldn't it? It really would be.
Jadeveon Clowney is still available. Zadarius Smith is still available. Preston Smith is still available. There are veteran edge rushers out there who are younger than Von Miller.
Yes, but a lot of them are, and they're all on that mercenary thing. Maybe bring a different one in every week, and then just cut them and see how that goes.
Reminder, if you are watching us live, which we do at 11 a.m. on Thursdays, and then 11 a.m. on Mondays and Thursdays once we get into the season, you can ask us questions or make comments. Minnesota Vikings and Chicago Bears are basically neck and neck in the projections. So we'll talk about the Vikings next, where I think our projections see a combination of defensive regression because the defense was, very dependent on turnovers and not necessarily stars.
Right.
And offensive, basically a rookie quarterback. Who knows? I don't know. Who knows?
Right. I'm talking about, trying to keep track of the Lions storylines, and it's all about edge rushers who aren't Hutchinson. And then every storyline coming out of Minnesota is, let's talk more about J.J. McCarthy's resilience and preparation and leadership and things like that, because that's all we have to go on. And that's a heck of a thing to rely on when you're trying to make a projection into a playoffs.
Yeah. And so, it's a good look. He's surrounded by a lot of talent, right? He's got probably the best wide receiver in the league.
Yes.
Either that or the second best.
Yeah.
And they've got good tackles.
They have a rebuilt.
Now that Darisaw will be back on the left side.
Yeah, they rebuilt the interior offensive line by raiding the Colts and getting guys they thought were underrated from the Colts.
Yeah, it's weird to me, this excitement about Will Freeze. He played well last year in like 3 games or something, and everybody got really excited about it as a free agent. And I'm like, he didn't play that well before that, did he? Like, it was like 3 or 4 games.
Yeah, small sample size with the Colts, with the Richardson experience worries me that you're not seeing that. But Kwesi apparently agreed because he put a lot of money in front of Will Freeze.
The other side, no more Stephon Gilmore. Right now, it's either going to be Isaiah Rodgers or Jeff Okudah.
2 guys you cannot rely on at all.
Right.
And I'm trying to make sure I don't mess up a succession game. I have some very high-profile Vikings fans coming at me because I messed up the secession game. No, you got Brian Murphy in the nickel, and yeah, goodness, Mekhi Blackman possibly coming up through the ranks there. Not a lot at cornerback. It's a team that wants to solve that problem by smothering the quarterback before he can ever get the ball out, and that's something that Flores excels at.
I will admit I don't know much. There's a question here about Keith Carter.
I don't know.
He's the assistant offensive line coach. He's not somebody I know much about, but I guess he's kind of contentious.
I don't know. Help us out here. He didn't come up with
light that burns them from the sky. Please let us know why Keith Carter is so generally contentious. I guess former players have been very critical of him.
Okay, that's interesting.
Which is sort of interesting. I would think you would want to stay away from coaches that former players have been critical of because, you don't want to ruffle a lot of feathers with your assistant offensive line coach. Yes, he says it was a Jets coach who was horrible.
Okay.
If you're going to ruffle feathers, do it with your coordinator or your head coach. Don't do it with your assistant. It's a lot easier to go chill on your assistant offensive line coach, I would think.
Right. He's not an essential cog in the wheel, but going back to what we anticipate about the Vikings, there's a difference between saying McCarthy is in a great situation to develop, which I think we would agree he is with these receivers, with a pretty good offensive coaching staff. There's a difference between that and saying, well, this team's going to repeat with 13, 14 wins. That's ludicrous to project at that level. Right. I'm looking at the Vegas odds, and no one's projecting a season like that.
No, in fact, our projection is very close to the Vegas. I believe they're at 8.5.
Yeah, they're at 8.5, and I was looking. Let me just grab it real quick. Where if you are a disbeliever in the Vikings, you can go under 9.5 at -125. So actually, yeah, it's right about where we are. It's probably a little more optimistic than we are, but you can go under 8.5 at +130 for the Vikings. Would you do that?
I think is honestly a reasonable bet.
Yeah.
And then the other team is the Chicago Bears. Obviously, the big change there is the hiring of Ben Johnson plus Dennis Allen as the defensive coordinator and the rebuilding of the interior offensive line with Joe Thuney, Jonah Jackson, and Drew Dahlman.
Yes.
Plus new toys for Johnson to play with Colston Loveland and Luther Burden.
Yes,
I think that everybody's a little burned by last year, getting so excited about the Bears. So I feel like it's almost like we're slow playing how good they could possibly put it together, like the chances that they could put it together, but we don't know if they're going to put it together. Let's be honest. Ben Johnson seemed like a genius as an offensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. That does not necessarily translate to head coach. They are different jobs.
Right, and it doesn't always translate from I have the best offensive line in football and can do X, Y, Z to I'm rebuilding an offensive line and now I'm trying to do A, B, and C. And I have a Jared Goff who comes to me as a veteran who's been to a Super Bowl and been coached by Sean McVay. And now I'm dealing with the Caleb Williams. Does he or does he not know how to operate the machine that starts the film? And we have to deal with all of these things. So those are tricky as well. In terms of getting burned, it really is hey, look at the new weapons, look at the new toys, look at the offensive line. I talk about in the chapter. We've done those look-ats in the past. This team went back out last year, and they got Keenan Allen, and they drafted Roma Dunze. And before that, in the trade, they got DJ Moore. And in the offensive line, there are guys they brought in like Nate Davis, I think, and guys they drafted in the first round. There's a little bit of a show me this actually working situation because we did it all for Williams. We did it all for Justin Fields. And again, the big question right now is we're in an offseason where we spent the whole time talking about whether Williams even wants to be there and what he knows and doesn't know. And that's a tricky thing to project all the way from that level to, well, this is a stealth playoff team.
Yeah, Jim Steckschulte asks, as the season goes along, how can we differentiate between the new offensive line personnel and Williams' improvement through pass rush stats? And it's true, it's very difficult. The fact is, the quarterback has a lot of control over the sack rate and the pressure rate. I think if the sack rate significantly improves, that's probably more Williams. But if you look at something like ESPN's pass block win rate, which is supposed to at least be quarterback agnostic, if that dramatically improves, but the sack rate stays the same, then you have better offensive line personnel, and the clock in Williams' head just hasn't improved.
Yeah, you can look at time to throw stats, things like Sports Info Solutions has blown blocks. PFF will assign sacks.
Yeah, we do pressures allowed. FTN has pressures allowed. Same thing.
Yep. So there's all these things, and then you can kind of triangulate them, and then be comfortable knowing what you don't know, so to speak, and thinking, well, if there is an improvement, it might be all boats rising up.
If you have a lot of uncaused pressures, right? We track when the pressure does not get blamed on a specific offensive lineman, then there's something up with the quarterback.
Yeah, and if you hear an announcer yelling, throw the ball, I know that was Sam Darnold last year, not Caleb Williams, but that's also a sign.
And we're not talking at all about the Chicago defense. They do have that. They do have players who go on the field and play defense. It doesn't seem like a great defense, even though there are some very good players like Jalen Johnson, the cornerback.
Yeah.
They have a couple of good linebackers. They basically have one pass rusher, which is Montez Sweat. There's not a lot. They brought in Dayo Odeyingbo, and then the backup pass rushers are like, hey, 5th-round picks from last year and college free agents, and who are these guys? So similar to Washington, there's a little bit of a question of where is the pass rush coming from.
Yeah, Grady Jackson comes in to help on the defensive line. He's been around since the Super Bowl era for the Falcons, so you know what we're talking about in terms of age there. It's funny, everybody rated the Colts like it was a little bodega where you can just grab something, isn't it? Like, oh, we get these Colts guys and we're bringing them in. So I don't know what that means for what the league thinks of the coaching staff there or Richardson or what was happening. But, really good secondary in Chicago. Really great secondary helps if you're actually in these games and the other quarterback has to attack it a little bit. Not so much when you're taking 68 sacks on offense and teams are running the ball in the fourth quarter saying, well, we dare your quarterback to do something against us. I
think my guess is that the projection is about right, which is they're going to be better, but with a hard schedule, they're not going to be a playoff team.
Yeah, what's interesting, by the way, with the schedule is because they were in last place, they get the Niners, which is
It's worse. It's almost worse to be in last place because you get the Niners, who we think are going to be really good this year.
Right. The Packers get the Cardinals, who are going to be probably the Cardinals as they always are. So that actually hurts. And of course, the Bears have to play the Packers twice. Well, the Packers get to play the Bears twice. Yeah, I think I don't see any meat on the bone. I think that the Bears are overvalued by the house a little bit, where you're not going to get anything unless you play an under and kind of be ghoulish about it.
All right, that does it for today's show, folks. Thanks again so much for those watching us live and listening afterwards as a podcast. Again, Thursdays, 11 a.m. on YouTube for the live show. And don't forget to buy the FTN Football Almanac 2025, which is now available, ftnfantasy.com/almanac. We will be back next week. Next week, we're going to do the NFC South. So you'll get all your good Saints cap talk next week. Or we'll just go Saints cap LOL. Let's move on to the next team. I don't know.
Tell me we have a guest.
I don't yet have a guest set up, but maybe we can set up somebody who can explain what the hell the Saints are thinking.
Oh gosh, I don't know about the Saints guest. That's too
Either
much.
That or someone to listen to us talk about how the Buccaneers are underrated.
That'd be cool. We can look for somebody there.
All right, that does it for the show, folks. We'll talk to you next week. For Mike Tenier, I'm Aaron Schatz. So long, everybody.